All right. So just to start off, people are obviously familiar with who you are. Some people might not be familiar with the Total Archery Challenge. So what is that? Can you explain what that event is?
Yeah, the Total Archery Challenge is an event that started years ago in Utah, kind of as a local event that was a way for a lot of the hunters that were on the Wasatch Front to be able to prep for their Western season that was coming up. I forget, it was something, used to call it something at the bird. I forgot what it was, but then Sean and Monica came in and really saw a bigger vision for Total Archery Challenge, and they came in and recognized its ability to become a family event. And one of the things I really commend Sean on was the fact that they made an archery course that wasn't about score, it was about fun, and it was about targets that were more challenging than what we would see as bow hunters. But it's like, practice hard and make the game easy. And so that was kind of some of those early thoughts behind extreme shots and things like that. But what's nice is you can always move up from the cone. We're not there for score, so you can range the target. You're there for fun. Most people are there really aiming at kill zones, not scoring rings. And the progression from a family's point of view is pretty dang consistent because I've been doing these now since very early on when they were very small. Typically, the dad would come, the kid might have a bow, and then usually by that second year, they're talking the wife into coming just because some of the courses might be several miles long, or usually are several miles long at least. So the wives would come just as a way to like get exercise, get in the outdoors, be on that weekend trip, and they would make it a family event at a ski lodge or wherever the location was. And then what happens is by the second year, it seems like the the wife always has or the girlfriend always has her first bow, and she kind of picks and chooses some targets and shoots some of the fun ones or the bigger ones. But then by that third year, time and time again, I see the ladies have the best bows out of the family, and they're the ones that are really getting into it. And there's so many guys that come up to me and say, "Thank you so much for like showing a way for, for my spouse to enjoy this without having to go out and grind it out on a hunt." And so I love the fact that there really isn't scoring cards. There's not money on the line. You can register. You have your own shooting time that you'll go out on. You normally take a chairlift or a shuttle somewhere really cool and remote, and you finish the course back down in that vendor village. And then in the afternoons, they kind of open it up to where people who didn't have shooting times can go out for like first come, first serve after 2 o'clock. So that starts happening. And then as people just congregate into the vendor villages, there's just a vendor village full of like-minded people and companies that are out there in the hunting demographic and also not necessarily totally in the hunting demographic, just like-minded folks that are out there for a family event on the mountain. That really plays right in with what our brand, Nock On Archery, our brand is all about teaching archery on a free platform to make all archers, regardless of what level you're at, better both on a range and in the hunting woods. So it's just a grassroots place for us to go as a company and me to interact with tens of thousands of people and give free archery advice, and then also just give some recognition to what our brand is about, and that's making all archers better regardless of the brand you choose or the type of archery equipment you're using. We just want to grow archery.
Speaking to the Total Archery Challenge, what does your particular bow setup look like that you personally will use at that type of event?
So This is actually the bow that I've been using this year. And honestly, other than the fact that it's white, this is a hunting model. This is an RX-9 Ultra, made by Hoyt. And a few of the things that are different, is for the Total Archery Challenge, I shoot a little bit lower weight, just because I believe that I'm a better bow hunter because I was a target archer. And back when I competed with the US team and competed professionally for over a decade, I just found that I was a more ethical bow hunter when I practiced and I prepared year round and not just right before hunting season. So, in order to get in more reps and solidify the process, not the prize, I shoot a little bit lower weight for my Total Archery Challenge bows. Like you can see here, I've got a rear stabilizer, so I'm trying to be as accurate as I possibly can. My quiver isn't on this particular bow. My peep size is a little bit smaller. Um, and then the other thing I change a little bit for the tack events is, on my personal arrows, I go to a slightly smaller vane profile for a little less wind drift, and you can also get your sight a little bit closer to the arrow so you can get some longer shots. And you're out there pushing past your limits. So I build a bow that allows me to just really put in a lot of practice time without having as much wear and tear on my body. Now, behind me right back there are my hunting bows. So the poundage is a little bit heavier poundage, about 10 pounds more, in most cases, just so that I can have the penetration that I want to be ethical as a bow hunter. My fletching has a little bit longer fletching profile. My arrow is a little bit heavier, so not a lot of huge changes. But the other thing is, you don't have to make these changes at a tack event. A lot of people are out there practicing exactly how they play, and they're out there with loaded packs, quivers on their bow. Other than their broadheads, they're literally using their bow hunting equipment. And I like that when it comes down to prep, but I also want to make sure people are able to get the reps and not just the prep. So for me, lowering that poundage, getting out there, kind of, walking through the resorts or the hotels with a big white bow versus a camo bow, just kind of lowers some guards for people that might be out there hiking and biking. And I don't want them to think that I'm just out there hunting in the middle of the summertime. So it adds some fun. It gives you the ability to personalize and have something that's a little bit different on the mountain. So not a lot of changes, but just enough to where you can just turn up the amount of reps that you're getting so that you can just solidify that process.
What is your practice regimen look like for something like the tack event, or maybe in comparison to preparing for actual hunting? So are those the same? Are they different? What do they look like to you?
They're a little bit different, and the reason they're different is, and the reality is they actually play very nicely together. So the reason they're different is for preparing for a good weekend on the mountain where you're going to be out there. Again, you have the ability to shoot courses that are probably at least double the distance of what we would see as, ethical or, typical in a hunting situation for distances to the targets. But the thing is, this kind of ties back in with, I remember it was probably 2 or 3 decades ago. I remember talking to Chuck Adams, and this was kind of long before, it was probably right at the beginning of my competitive career, but I was really more of a bow hunter at heart. And I remember him saying, your effective range as a bow hunter is probably only half of your effective range in practice. And that was such a good terminology to use because it a lot like I could see the reaction on your face. You're like, oh, okay, yep. So we're doubling the difficulty so that once it's time to actually apply that into a real world condition, it's half as hard. So the total archery challenge, they normally have a triple digit target on a lot of the ranges. And to be honest with you, the average distance, if you're shooting it all the way back from the cone, the average distance on the entire course is double the distance that is a max on a Pro 3D range. Um, so you have the ability to just push your own envelope. And as it says, it's a total challenge. And, that's what's cool about it is you can build confidence, hopefully. Hopefully you don't lose confidence by going out there. But the other thing is if you do go out there and realize your effective range is just not what you thought it would be, that's also a good time for you to take some notes, ask some questions to some people around there, and most likely you're going to be with some people around your target that are going to give you some great advice on, hey, my first year I was doing this too, and I changed it up to this. I went to a site that's got the ability to move to where you don't only have fixed pins all the time. You start to, honestly, the further the distance, the more you magnify your mistakes. So what it is a magnifying glass to give you transparency to what you need to work on. And that I use that for myself, because once I go out there and start shooting up angles and down angles, and maybe the target's smaller and twice the distance, or you've got a bunch of trees psyching you out to this target that's at the end of the lane, it's all just little things that help you be better as a bow hunter and just learn to hyper focus on that process, which is what puts that arrow down there in the right place to begin with anyway.
What's a one or two things that comes to mind that's maybe incredibly helpful that they haven't already thought about?
Well, you can, there's a couple things, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier. The process is more important than the prize. And a lot of people want to focus on either, I want to shoot 100 yards, but they don't necessarily realize that the technique that they can implement at 10 or 20 yards will actually give them the result they want at 100 yards. However, again, the distance is the magnifier. So the more you're magnifying any flaws in your technique, the more those are going to widen up downrange. So being able to minimize flaws and perfect the process and the form, it's going to give you tighter groups up close, and then you can slowly work back. So for me, I just really tell people, and honestly, our platform is the best place people can go to type in Archery 101, or if you recognize the fact that your personal flaw is, how to use a release aid correctly, or how do I get further distance out of my bow, or how do I shoot better groups in a hunting thing, whatever these are, we've broke down so many different micro and macro things into what makes people miss, and I educate on the why, so that way you can self-diagnose your flaws and then hyper focus on what you need to do to clean that particular thing up. And honestly, our platform is usually geared on information that I am currently working on myself, and I'm very transparent on, even though I've been shooting a bow professionally for 30 years, there's times where I have hiccups, or I've put my bow down for a little bit too long and I got to pick it up and I got to restart that process. So I just always boil things right down. And I have a little series called The School of Nock. Season 1, there was like 6 things that were just in-depth classes that, again, you can get on our platform, but these were in-depth classes on the things that I focus on at the beginning of every single season. And honestly, regardless of what time of season it is, for me, it's always January is when I restart my archery clock. For some people, it might be right now, right a few months prior to hunting season. Just go right back into the basics. And that's something that you cannot stress enough, going in and focusing on the foundation, learning the stance, grip, shoulder, anchor, position of the peep sight and your head position, and then the ability to pull through. I've boiled all that down to where you're not distracted by trying to focus on too many placebos. You're just focusing on what actually affects your accuracy and your technique.
You have a very grueling schedule. You do a lot throughout the year, both archery events like you just discussed, as well as your hunting schedule. So, what does 2025 look like for you?
2025 right now looks like a blur. It's July 1st, and we're past the halfway point. I'm already, right now, actually today, I am going to start changing over my arrows, changing my arrows back to a hunting setup. And then what I'm going to do, like I said, I'm about 10 pounds lighter than what I've been on my setup compared to what I want to hunt with come the middle or end of August. So my plan right now is I'm going to increase the pulling weight on my bow about 1 pound every week during practice. And my practice will definitely become more frequent. And I'm going to focus on, a little bit lower overall rep count compared to what I've been doing right here into the busy tack season. And again, as I go up in poundage, I'm going to probably focus on more quality shots and also spend a lot more time focusing on the accuracy and the tune of that hunting arrow and that broadhead, and getting a quiver back on my bow and learning to shoot with the weight on the side of the bow. And then honestly start to incorporate things like wearing a rucksack during my practice, having a weighted backpack on, starting to wear more of my harness, shooting in some longer sleeves, on a morning where it's not blistering hot. So I'll start to implement the real world hunting type vibe starting now, because we're only 45 days out from antelope season starting out west.
What is one more little nugget of archery knowledge that you can leave the listeners with here?
One of the things that I've really come to pay attention to more in myself, but I also have really started to recognize this for other people too, is right now on media, there's so many people that have a voice on teaching archery or bow hunting or whatever that is. And what I would say is find the personality that suits you and make sure you just make a plan and stick to that plan and don't get lost just scrolling through. And I say that because I've got a guitar right over there. I'm learning guitar and self-teaching myself guitar, and there's been several times where I've realized that I've come in early to practice and I've sat down and I've spent more time trying to find the practice that I want to do. And all of a sudden I realize, like, I've been scrolling for 25 minutes. I could have just used 25 minutes to become a better player. So it's not always about just updating the gear or the type of training regimen. The key to really solidifying the basics and the foundation is just doing it consistently day and day and day again. And With archery, honestly, even if you practice the exact same distance with the exact same target and the exact same bow every single day, all you're doing is ingraining re repetition and repeatability. And there's a lot of evidence that the reps mean more than the application or the type of practice that you're doing. So, if you're going to search for what you should practice, limit the time that you search and set a target of, okay, I'm going to go out there at 7 o'clock. I've got an hour to shoot. If I don't find something I want to practice at by 7:05, then I'm shooting the same thing that I did all day yesterday. I'm going to do that for the next 55 minutes. If you do that, I think overall you're going to spend more time behind the bow and less time figuring out what to do.
Speaking of content, and finding that's the educational materials out there, where can everyone find all of the content that you are producing, and where can they follow you on social?
Well, so on social media, I'm most active on a semi-live basis, I guess, on Instagram at NOCKON TV. So Nock On TV, knock without a K, just like you see it spelled behind me. But honestly, if you go to the Nock On Archery website, um, and I will pull this up for all of you right now. But if you go to the Nock On Archery website, you'll come to the homepage right there. And if you go up to the sandwich menu at the top, you'll see the second thing is called School of Nock. And if you click the School of Nock, we've got several categories in there: learn to shoot, coaching sessions, technical and tuning, bow builds. And honestly, if you click those, you can get into just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of training tips. And you can use, at that point, if you're in the School of Knock section, you could go in and type in a keyword. You know, if you're archery 101, type that in and it's going to bring you right into, you know, day one with a bow. I've got archers that had never shot a bow before and they can go into that. So that website is knockonarchery.com. Otherwise, our YouTube channel has hundreds of videos throughout the year that are posted, whether it's hunts, whether it's what I call making the shot, which is at Total Archery Challenge events. I go to a target and address it just like it was a hunting scenario or a hunting situation. And I talk through all the different things that myself as a professional would be thinking about that play into the placement of that arrow. Otherwise, we also have, you know, how to cook wild game, some awesome wild game cooking, and then also some great fitness that's functional for archery and for bow hunting.